Berwick, a small medieval village nestled amidst rolling hills, was a place of simple joys and sorrows. Life revolved around the rhythms of nature, a tapestry woven with the changing seasons. But that year a shadow fell upon Berwick, a darkness that seeped into the very soul of the village. It began with the death of Silas Thorne, the wealthiest man in Berwick. He was found dead in his manor, his face contorted in a horrifying grimace. No signs of struggle, no indication of illness, just a sudden, inexplicable demise.
The villagers whispered amongst themselves, their voices hushed with fear. Silas Thorne was a man of wealth and power, known for his ruthless ambition and his disregard for the less fortunate. Some whispered that he had made a pact with the devil himself, trading his soul for earthly riches. Now it seemed the devil had come to collect his due.
The air grew heavy with suspicion and dread. The once familiar streets now seemed menacing and sinister. The laughter of children was silenced, replaced by the hushed whispers of adults. Fear, like a contagious disease, spread through Berwick faster than wildfire. The villagers, deeply religious and superstitious, saw the hand of Satan in Silas Thorne's demise. Stories of Thorne's ruthlessness and greed resurfaced, now painted in the sinister hues of demonic influence.
There were tales of him cheating honest folk out of their land, of driving families into poverty with his exorbitant interest rates. Some even claimed to have seen strange lights emanating from his manor at night, accompanied by blood-curdling screams.
The whispers grew louder, feeding the flames of fear and paranoia. Soon, the villagers were convinced that Silas Thorne's soul was damned, trapped in the clutches of the devil. They feared that his very presence in consecrated ground would invite the devil's wrath upon their village.
Old Martha, the village elder, claimed to have seen Silas Thorne conversing with a shadowy figure on the eve of his death. The figure, she swore, had eyes that burned with an infernal light, and a voice that rasped like dry leaves in the wind.
Martha's words, fueled by the villagers' fear and superstition, spread like wildfire. A consensus began to form. Silas Thorne had indeed made a pact with the devil. His sudden and gruesome death was the devil's way of marking his claim.
The fear in Berwick morphed into something more potent, a chilling certainty that they were dealing with forces beyond their comprehension. Their fear was palpable, a suffocating blanket that stifled their laughter and extinguished their joy. A group of young men, emboldened by fear and driven by desperation, decided to take matters into their own hands. Led by Thomas, the blacksmith's son, they resolved to exhume Silas Thorne's body and destroy it, thereby severing any ties he might have had with the devil. Under the cloak of darkness, they crept towards the graveyard, their hearts pounding in their chests. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and the weight of their sacrilegious mission.
They worked quickly, their movements fueled by a potent mix of fear and adrenaline. The desecration of a grave, a taboo in their society, weighed heavily upon them. Yet the fear of the devil's wrath was a more powerful motivator.
They dragged Thorne's coffin into the open, the stench of decay hitting them like a physical blow. With trembling hands, they pried open the coffin, their faces illuminated by the flickering light of their lanterns. The sight that greeted them was enough to turn the strongest stomach.
The desecration of Silas Thorne had begun, a desperate attempt to rid Berwick of its unholy shadow.
Silas Thorne's once handsome face was now a grotesque mask of decay, his body bloated and reeking of death.
Ignoring the bile rising in their throats, they dragged the corpse from its resting place and set it ablaze.
The flames roared, consuming Thorne's body, and with it they hoped the devil's hold on their village.
As the flames died down, leaving behind only ashes and the lingering smell of burnt flesh, a palpable sense of relief washed over the young men.
They had committed a sacrilegious act, but they had done it to save their village.
For a brief moment, the grip of fear that had held Berwick captive seemed to loosen.
The villagers emerged from their homes, their faces etched with a cautious hope.
The whispers died down, replaced by hushed prayers and hopeful glances.
The nightmare they dared to believe was finally over. Their relief, however, was short-lived.
A few days later, a deadly plague swept through Berwick with the ferocity of a raging storm.
It began slowly, insidiously, with a fever that ravaged the body, leaving its victims weak and delirious.
Then came the agonizing death, slow and excruciating.
The villagers watched in horror as their loved ones succumbed to the relentless grip of the plague.
The cries of the sick and dying filled the air, a heart-wrenching symphony of despair.
The plague spared no one, rich or poor, young or old.
It tore through Berwick like an avenging angel, leaving a trail of death and devastation in its wake.
The once familiar streets were now littered with the bodies of the dead and dying.
The sweet smell of spring was replaced by the stench of sickness and decay. As the plague tightened its grip on Berwick, the villagers were consumed by a terrifying thought. They had angered the devil.
By desecrating Silas Thorne's body, they had invited his wrath, and the plague was their punishment.
The fear that had been simmering beneath the surface now erupted with renewed fury.
The villagers turned on each other, their fear and desperation morphing into paranoia and violence.
Accusations of witchcraft and demonic possession flew thick and fast, fueling the flames of chaos and despair.
They saw the plague as divine retribution, a punishment for their hubris in challenging the devil's domain.
Their once strong faith now wavered, replaced by a chilling certainty that they were cursed.
Berwick, once a vibrant testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity, was reduced to a ghost town, haunted by the ghosts of its past. The few survivors, forever scarred by the horrors they had witnessed, abandoned the village, carrying with them the chilling tale of Silas Thorne's unholy pact and the devastating consequences of their actions. The story of Berwick served as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the power of fear and superstition and the unseen forces that govern the universe. It whispered of the fine line that separates the natural and the supernatural, the rational and the irrational, and the terrible price to be paid for crossing that line. The devil's wrath, it seemed, was not a force to be trifled with, and the village of Berwick stood as a silent testament to that chilling truth.